If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything that you need all in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on any listening platform like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many, many more. It's everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome to the Wartime Leadership Podcast, where we explore what spiritual resiliency looks like from different perspectives. We often focus on the physical, emotional, and social areas of resiliency, but often neglect the spiritual pillar. This looks different for everyone. We will explore what spiritual resiliency looks like in the lives of our guests, who are people from all different walks of life. Today's episode is sponsored by Success Draft, where we help you transform your dreams into drafted plans. Head over to successdraft.com to get started on your future today. This episode's guest is U.S. Army Major General retired General John Gronski. He is the CEO of Leader Grove LLC and is an inspirational speaker, leadership consultant, executive coach, and author. He served our country for over 40 years on active duty and with the Pennsylvania National Guard. He is a combat-tested and decorated veteran. Now, in the civilian sector, John leads diverse teams charged with implementing large, often complex projects. Welcome to the show, General Gronski.
Hey, Nathan, it's great to be with you. Thank you for hosting this.
It is absolutely wonderful to have you here. I was actually connected through a couple of different ways with you, one of which was somebody that considers you a mentor, Joe Bogdan, Chief Joe Bogdan, right. And now he mentors me and a few other individuals. And then, of course, you've got the entire Lima Charlie team that has talked to you and had you in. So this is just an absolute honor to have you here.
Hey, it's my pleasure.
Well, hey, how about this? Why don't we start off with a quick background? Why don't you walk us through kind of where you've been, how you got to this point in your life, and what you've been doing?
Okay. Well, somebody as old as me, that's going to be a long story, but I'll try to keep it. I'll try to keep it short. You know, I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre area, blue collar family. You know, my father was a World War II veteran. And he had a 7th grade education. That's it. And he opened up a business after World War II. He started fixing cars, and then he started, selling cars, and then, had a towing service. So when I was born in 1956, and as I, became, 8 years old, 9 years old, I remember, I was put to work sweeping floors in the garage, and eventually, graduated to studding tires, studding snow tires, driving a tow truck. And so I grew up in a family business, learned a lot about relationship management, about engaging people, about customer service. So that was all good. And, my dad, being a World War II vet, he really encouraged me to join the military. So when I went to college at the University of Scranton, he wanted me to join the ROTC, but of course I didn't want to, because my father was recommending it. But as it turned out, I did on my own make that decision to go to basic camp. So my first experience with the military was in 1976, Fort Knox, Kentucky. Drill sergeants all had served in Vietnam, and I just loved it. It was the whole physical part of it, the camaraderie, and never really looked back since then. I've like you mentioned, I've served over 40 years in the military and the Army, and have met so many great people, have served with so many great folks. I have longtime friends from the military, from the Army, and other services, and I've just been blessed. The Army has done a lot more for me than I've ever done for it, and I just have had great opportunities. Probably the most honorable opportunity I had was to command a brigade in Ramadi, Iraq in 2005, 2006. Had an opportunity to lead 5,000 soldiers and Marines there, and a life-changing experience. Certainly has formed a great deal of my leadership philosophy. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Well, that's a great lead up for all of these next 5 questions that we have, because I think that your time in the military is going to help you out with this. So what is one thing that you find repulsive?
Absolutely somebody who lacks character, lacks integrity.
Well, I get that. Absolutely. 100%. And I understand why you would find it repulsive. And I actually believe that Chief Bogdan had a very similar answer to that. So I can see where that mentorship is coming into play. What is one thing that is in your online shopping cart, or what is one thing that you have absolutely wanted to purchase, but you just haven't yet?
Actually, I'll change your question up a little bit. I actually ordered something yesterday, and was sitting in the shopping cart for a couple hours, and then I said, let me get this, and it's it's basically bands that restrict blood flow. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but bands to put around the top of your arm or the top of your leg that restrict blood flow. And it really is supposed to be a great way to build up some more muscle mass. And especially at my age, I'm in my mid 60s, and muscle mass is really important the older you get, because it's the protein in that muscle that helps you recover from injuries, from sickness, that type of thing. And it's important for every age, but especially as you get older. So they were sitting in that shopping cart for a while. I was thinking, do I want to purchase these or not? And I finally figured, let me buy them. So they should arrive tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to working out with them because it's something new to me.
There you go. So, wow, you really did definitely change that up on me, but I'm glad that you did. So what is one thing that you loved about your time in the military?
The people, absolutely the people. Just the relationships, the opportunity to serve with people that have shared values and believe in a lot of the things that I believe in. And I'm not trying to say you should always hang out with people who just believe the same things you do, but I'm talking about strong beliefs, spiritual belief in our country, belief in service, those type of things that are so important. So I think the thing I enjoyed most was just the people that I've had the honor to serve with.
Oh, yeah. And those core values, those things that we all should have within us who are serving. Yeah. What is one thing that you would leave your job for? If today they gave you the ultimatum, you have to leave your job, but it's for this reason, what would it be?
You mean an opportunity of some sort?
That works.
Okay. I'll allow myself to be vulnerable here. I would love to be an ambassador to a country like Poland. That's where my heritage is, or a country like Lithuania, where I've spent a great deal of time. And I would leave what I'm doing right now in a second. if an opportunity like that presented itself, just because I have an affinity for that part of the world. And I would just love to help them understand more about, hey, this is what the United States is really all about.
So I gravitate towards that answer because my undergrad work was in political science. So I gravitate towards that.
Yeah, I really believe in security cooperation and just working with these countries such as Poland, such as Lithuania, that are such great allies of ours.
Oh, absolutely. And they're the smaller unknowns.
Exactly.
So.
Especially Lithuania. Lithuania has a population of 3 million people.
Yeah, that's
so.
What, a borough in New York City?
Exactly.
All right, General. So you've got 2 plane tickets. I'm giving them to you, and you're going somewhere that you have never been before, and you're going somewhere that you've already been. Where are those 2 plane tickets to?
I think a place I've never been that I would like to go to is Australia. And actually, I have a couple of friends there I would love to see. And a place that I've been, I would say, I'd say Lithuania. I really like Lithuania. I have a lot of friends there. And the only reason I'm saying Lithuania over Poland is because I was just in Poland in October. And it's been a while since I've been in Lithuania. So I'd say Lithuania would be the choice.
Oh, beautiful. Well, hey, folks, this is when you're going to want to get out your pens and your papers, because I've got my notepad ready to go because we're about to be invested in today. General, if you don't mind, I would like you to kind of talk to us about your leadership style, and not only your leadership style, but kind of how it's evolved as you've done different positions or you've moved up in rank. How would you define your leadership style?
Okay, well, I'd say my style is participatory, where I do like to bring the people around me into a team type of concept, and I do like to ask opinions, and I do like to use the talent around me. I'm not the type of guy who thinks I have all the answers. I do rely on other people. I do like to bounce things, across people before I make decisions. As a matter of fact, I've many times I've had to kind of caution people that I do like to think out loud. So, just because I'm saying something doesn't mean I'm making a decision on it right then and there. Nice. People will know when I make a decision. I'll be very clear about that, but I do like to think out loud. But in terms of my leadership philosophy, which is a little bit different than a leadership style, my leadership philosophy is based on character, competence, and resilience. And it's those 3 elements that make up my leadership philosophy, and that has certainly developed over time.
So how has that developed? Like, how did you take that as a young lieutenant, fresh out of college? Now you're leading people and you're put into that position of leadership. How did you take that character, competence, and resilience and kind of grow it over those years?
Yeah, I've really grown to understand how very important character is and values are, and really adhering to those values and the makeup of one's character. As a matter of fact, when I think back on my commissioning program, I wish there was more stress put on just how important character and values really are when it comes to leadership, because I do believe it's foundational. And when I talk to young aspiring leaders now, I always do a foot stomp on how important values and character are. So I've certainly matured in my understanding of how important character is in terms of leadership. And I'll tell you what, Nathan, you may have a lot of military folks listening in, perhaps some law enforcement, and the reason values are really so critical is especially for somebody who does a job like you do, in the military. Because when you think of it, the military is one of the only organizations where you could legally take somebody's life. And it's also one of the only organizations where you could order somebody to put their life at risk. So that is an awesome responsibility, both of those things, to take a life and also to put out an order that could potentially cause somebody to give up their life. That's an awesome responsibility, and that is why values and character are so darn important for anybody serving in the military or serving in law enforcement.
And I actually a couple of weeks ago had an individual on from Iowa, and his company that he owned ran over $700 million in funding, in money for individuals. And thinking about that link between values and character, when it comes to somebody who's running somebody's money, it goes hand in hand. So it's not only for our military crowd, it's for everyone out there. They need to be able to gravitate to these concepts.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, if you're handling somebody's money, you've got their life in your hands. You might have their kids' education in your hands. So yeah, anytime you're dealing with those type of awesome life just challenges, values are so important when you're in that type of line of work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love your core values: character, competence, and resilient. Of course, the main concept of this podcast is really to look at spiritual resiliency across different people who are coming from different walks of life, because it doesn't look the same for you as it does for me, as it will for the next person that I have on. And it's really important because of the fact that resiliency is important in each person's life, that they have it, not only spiritual, but physical, emotional, social. Here you and I are talking to one another. You talked about having some bands that you took out. That's that physical, right? You have your body has changed. My body has changed. Now I have to find a different way to become resilient. And in that same way, spiritual resiliency falls hand in hand into that. So could you define for us what comes to mind when we say spiritual resiliency?
Yep, absolutely. I think it's understanding that there's something bigger than yourself going on in the universe. It's not just all about us. It's about something bigger than us that is happening, and understanding that the way to fill your heart is not by doing something for yourself. The way to fill your heart is by doing something for other people. And I think if you think of some people that are just kind of shallow and they're struggling and they don't feel fulfilled, those are generally the people that are focused on themselves. If you could imagine somebody who is fulfilled and is happy and is joyous and is filled with love, that's generally somebody who is focused on doing something for other people. So I think that's one of the big elements of becoming spiritually resilient.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like how you point out that when somebody isn't, it's more than likely that they're not filled themselves. So they try to steal from you and what you have. But it can't work that way because we are not cookie cutter. We are not. So finding a way to be able to fill it is very important. So
yes, and that's where life purpose comes in. That's where it's extremely important for people to reflect on what they believe their life purpose is. And you're right, it's not cookie cutter. What my life purpose is may not be the same as what your life purpose is. And it doesn't mean that we're not focused on serving other people. We're just focused on serving other people in a different way. So I think reflecting on life purpose and understanding that is a great way also to help build spiritual resilience.
Absolutely. Now, can you walk us through a moment or a time when you had to rely on that spiritual pillar, when you had to rely on spiritual resiliency to make it through or to take your team through?
Yeah, I mean, a perfect example is commanding that brigade, those 5,000 soldiers and Marines in Ramadi, Iraq. It was 2005, 2006. Ramadi was known as one of the most violent places on the face of the earth at that time. Uh, Unfortunately, I had 82 of my soldiers and Marines and sailors killed in action during that period of time. I mean, that, and over 260 of our Marines and soldiers were wounded seriously enough where they had to be evacuated back to the United States. So it was very violent, very chaotic. And that's where you really had to understand, why are we here? What is the purpose of why we're here? And what I arrived at and what I communicated to our soldiers and Marines is the reason we were over there doing that job we were doing was to keep our families, our friends, and all Americans safer back home in the United States. And again, if you're doing something for somebody else rather than for yourself, it's an awesome purpose. And I think it helps people get through, the challenges that they're facing, and could understand, why am I putting my life at risk? Well, I'm doing it for my family, for other Americans. And that was probably certainly one of the pivotal times when my spiritual resilience was put to the test. And that's how I was able to work through that.
Okay, so how do you build spiritual resiliency? We're going to look at this from three different ways. How do you build it in yourself, your family, and your team?
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the way you put that, because again, when I'm talking to aspiring leaders or other leaders about how to become a better leader, I talk about the fact that leaders have to develop their resiliency, but then more than that, leaders also have to develop resiliency in those that they lead. So it's not just developing your own resiliency, but it's helping your followers become more resilient too. And there's several tactical things you could do. I've really found that reflecting every morning when I wake up on what I'm thankful for helps me to become more resilient. And I think people have to understand that hey, no matter what challenge you're going through, and it could be some devastating challenge, it could be death in your family or sickness in your family, or your organization might be on the verge of going bankrupt, or some devastating thing. But no matter what, we all have something to be thankful for, even in the midst of those challenges. So every morning I get up and I have these little 3x5 cards, and I'll write on top of the 3x5 card, grateful for, and then I'll list three things. And it could be something simple. It could be, hey, the weather is nice today. Or it could be, I'm grateful for my wife, who I've been married to for over 40 years. Or it could be, a book that I had an opportunity to read. It could be something dramatic, or it could be something simple. But I think if you focus on what you're grateful for, that's a great way to help you understand that, hey, I might be going through some challenges, but I know I'm going to be able to overcome them. And I encourage other people to do that as well. I think journal writing is a great way to build resilience. And I think a good technique when you're journal writing is, three elements to it. First element is just reflect on what that day has brought to you. The second part is learnings. Write down one or two things that you've learned throughout that day. And then the third part, again, is what you're grateful for. So, that is something. And I think just spending a little bit of quiet time, call it meditation if you want to, reflection, but just spending some quiet time to really just think about, hey, where am I at? Where do I want to go? How do I want to bring my team along with me? Some of those things I think are basic tactical things you could do to help develop spiritual resilience.
Now, were these some things that you did during your time in Iraq?
Yeah, absolutely. I've matured since then. I mean, that was 17 years ago, and certainly I've matured over the last 17 years. I will say that time in Iraq was, certainly a life-changing experience. It was definitely a defining period in my life, but I've had many other defining periods in my life too, just like most people. And again, I did implement some of these techniques while I was over there, but I also learned from that stress that I was under to help me implement these techniques moving forward after that.
Wow. I journal in a little bit of a different way, right? Like I do what's called the SOAP method: scripture, observation, application, and then prayer.
I like that.
So in knowing how you do this as well, I think it's really unique to be able to link them in, because if I use a 3x5 card to write down what I'm grateful for, not only do I have that readily, but now I can go back and I can look, here's what I was grateful for. If I'm having a bad day, if I'm having a day that I'm just going through pure hell, if you want to put it that way, I can look at those cards and be able to go, even the small things you have to be grateful in.
Yeah, you're exactly right there. And what I do, I write those 3 things down on that 3x5 card in the morning, and I'll put it in a jar down in the kitchen. And again, if I'm having a really bad day and I need to kind of get re-blued on how good my life really is, I'll pull that card out and read it, and I smile, and it kind of keeps me going.
Wow. Now, I did kind of vaguely mention whenever we were talking before about your book, Iron Sharpened Leadership. I started to get into this book, and it's really, really interesting because it is definitely done in a format that I prefer. Can you walk us through what this book is about and what it means to you as the author?
Yeah, really what the book is about is the last 40 years of my life and different lessons that I've learned, largely due to mistakes I've made, and a lot of times you learn more from I like to say I learn more from when I make a mistake than I do from when I accidentally do something successfully, So, people say, how long did it take you to write the book? It probably took me 40 years to write the book, because through my journal writing and through other writing that I've done, I kind of went back and took a lot of those things I've wrote over the last 40 years or so and revised them based on my ability to mature, my leadership philosophy, and put it into the book. And it is the sections of the book are based on those 3 elements of my leadership philosophy. There's a section on character, a section on competence, and a section on resiliency. And when I say competence, just to kind of talk about that for a moment, I'm not talking about technical competence in one specific job. I'm talking about leader competence. And some of the things I'm talking about when I talk about leader competence is the ability to develop a shared vision and provide that vision to your followers. How to communicate properly. How to make decisions and having the courage to make decisions. And then also taking on the responsibility of a leader to develop future leaders, and coach and mentor. So, but when I talk about competence in terms of my leadership philosophy, those are the things I'm really talking about.
Well, I really like that. But the one thing that I really liked is, of course, I did my research prior to jumping into this. I started reading back in chapter 32, where you start talking about spiritual fitness, just simply because of the nature of this conversation that we're having. And I came across a little excerpt. says, I have always been a big fan of our chaplains. These warriors of a higher power could bolster the spirit of the soldiers anytime they visited a unit. Just the wording that you use, especially the warriors of a higher power. I love that. I love that.
I've always used my chaplains, and the first time I've had an opportunity to command where I had a chaplain was at the battalion level, and always used the chaplain, to say, a prayer before one of our meetings, and to ask the chaplain, hey, chaplain, how does the morale seem to you? Or what, obviously the chaplain's not going to share any, confidential information that he might have with a particular soldier, but just in general, what is the pulse of the unit that the chaplain is feeling? Mm-hmm. And, when I was over at U.S. Army Europe, the last 3 years of my career, 2016 to 2019, the U.S. Army Europe Chaplain Ellis, he's still a friend of mine. He's stationed at TRADOC now, and he was just a man who was spiritually strong, but then he also ensured that he was physically resilient as well, and mentally resilient, and just all of those things, a total package. And most of the chaplains I've had the honor to serve with really focused on the total package, and I think that's important. So I've always been inspired by the chaplains who I've had the opportunity to serve with. I've always used them as sounding boards. Sometimes I've used them as a spiritual advisor. And I love that about the military, how the military does embrace the chaplains. I hope they always will. I hope the chaplains will always be a strong part of our military. And, when you look at civilian organizations, a lot of civilian organizations don't have anything similar to what we have in the Army in terms of having, or Air Force, whatever services, is having chaplains available for senior leaders to be able to rely on. I think that's so important.
And I don't think that outside in the civilian world, I don't think anyone fully understands what a chaplain is about. A chaplain is not tied to a certain religion or a certain belief, but rather you could have embedded in your organization a Muslim chaplain.
Absolutely.
They can't share anything outside because you can go to them, you can talk. It's another agency that we use for mental health.
Yeah, it's just about that spiritual resilience and spiritual. Really, the chaplain, I think, is the spiritual thought leader of an organization. And when you're going to a chaplain, whether it be a Muslim chaplain, Protestant, Jewish, Catholic, what have you, you're not going based on a particular religion. You're just going based on that spiritual faith that one has.
Yeah, and continuing to have that spiritual, the pillar just continuing to come beside it. But I think that you're right when you say that you use them as a gauge of the morale of the unit, because more often than not, they have a good feeling of it because people feel comfortable going and talking to the chaplains. They can give you advice based upon what they hear.
Yeah, and it's a judgment-free zone with the chaplain. If I'm a soldier, I'm going to go talk to the chaplain. I'm pretty confident the chaplain is not going to be judging me. Where you go to somebody else, no matter what the rank, and it might be judged in a certain way, but you can go talk to the chaplain and feel like you're not being judged. The chaplain's going to listen. The chaplain may not always have all the answers for you, but at least it's somebody that you can talk to and feel that person is listening and not judging you.
Yeah, absolutely. And with your book, something that you do really, really well that I absolutely love is you give these chapters of inspiration, of knowledge, these 40 years of advice that you collected. But then at the end of each of them, you do action steps. You do action steps and spiritual component notes. And I love that because that gives people who are tactile ways to be able to act out what you have just given them advice about.
Yeah, and some the actions at the end of each chapter are not meant to be prescriptive. They're meant to be, hey, consider this. And then the same with the spiritual component. The spiritual component is there because I think no matter what we're facing, we could consider some type of spiritual element of whether we're facing a challenge or whether we're celebrating success. I think it's important to realize that there's something greater than us working out there that we should at least be aware of.
I'll give you an example. Chapter 6, what leadership is all about. One of the action steps is to develop a resilient mind and believe you can find an opportunity in every setback. And then on the spiritual side, it's stuff that you wouldn't even imagine being spiritual, but it until you look deeper, and it's good because it's thought provoking. It says strength is derived from trust.
Exactly.
Those are action steps within themselves. It's stating what you need to go do, and I love that aspect about this book.
Yeah, thank you. And that part with trust is trust is really, I believe, like the blood flowing through a body. If your heart stops beating and your blood stops flowing, you're dead. And I think it's the same with the organization. If you can't cultivate trust and have that flow through an organization, the organization is ultimately dead.
Absolutely. So how would you wrap up? Take this whole podcast, take this whole episode. How would you wrap it up?
Yeah, I would say going back to the beginning, character is the foundation of leadership. Principles, I like to say that if you set aside your principles in order to get ahead, you're really only going to get behind. So it's just so important to stay true to your values, keep that strong character, and be true to those principles. Don't mortgage your principles because you think you're going to get ahead, because it's not going to work. And I think that's the best way to wrap up everything that we've talked about.
Wow, absolutely. All right. So, General, what are you reading right now, or what are your recommendations to our listeners?
Yeah, actually, the book I'm reading right now is a book about CEO of Ford Motor Company. I think he became the CEO in 2006, and I think he was the chief executive officer of Ford until around 2015. His last name is Malawi, and he's a credible leader who understood how important transparency and integrity was in leading that company, and he expected the people who were part of his senior leadership team to display that transparency and integrity. And the name of the book is American Icon. It's a good book that I'm reading. But books that I'd recommend to people, I love a book by Gus Lee. And Gus Lee, I consider him to be one of my mentors. And the name of his book is Courage, the Backbone of Leadership. He talks a lot about values in that book. It's an excellent book. Recommend it highly. And then another book that I really gained a lot from is a book called The Leadership Engine. It's by a guy named Noel Tichy. And he talks about the importance of leaders sharing stories about themselves. And he calls it a teachable point of view, where if leaders share stories about, maybe mistakes they made and how they were able to overcome those mistakes, or, where they came from, where the leader came from, and how he was able to rise above various challenges in his or her life to get to where they are now. That's a good one. And then, hey, getting into a military book, I'll say Hal Moore's book, We Were Soldiers Once and Young, just a classic that really has a tremendous amount of leadership principles in it.
Yes, indeed. All right. So now we did talk more about the military side, but as you transitioned out into the civilian sector where you started focusing on companies and organizations, can you just give us a little bit about what you're doing now to kind of help corporate America have a better idea? Because I mean, these books, some of these are centered around, Ford, other organizations, civilian organizations. How are you transitioning what you knew to where you are now?
Yeah, I think leadership is leadership. Whether you're leading in the military, leading in law enforcement, leading in the civilian sector, I think all the principles are very, very similar. I had one civilian that was in an audience that I was speaking to about 3 weeks ago. He asked a question at the end of my presentation, and really, as he asked the question, he made a comment. He said, "Oh, you've been in the military, so I'm sure, all you had to do was give an order and everybody was just going to follow it." And I said, let me dispel that rumor right now. I said, in the military, as a leader, no matter what rank you are, you still have to get buy-in from your followers. So the similarities between leading in the military and any civilian organization are very, very similar. So I do a lot of leadership training and speaking to civilian organizations. As a matter of fact, tomorrow morning, I'm going to be speaking to about 15 chief executive officers from various companies in the central Pennsylvania area. And my calendar is pretty much booked for much of this year, speaking to industry groups and specific companies. And then I'm also doing a lot of work helping law enforcement develop their leaders and helping law enforcement officers become better leaders. So that's something I really love to do because the law enforcement culture is very similar to the military culture. They put their lives on the line every day, and it's just great to be able to work with folks like that as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've actually had a couple of great police officers on the show to run us through kind of the mental stigma, the same thing that the military was dealing with for the longest time. So yeah, I know that you're extremely busy. I know that you have a schedule that I could not keep up with myself, but I am so grateful that you took the time to invest in me and invest in the listeners that are listening to this show. You have meant a lot to a lot of important people in my life. So I know that through their leadership and through your leadership trickling down, that you have affected a lot of people. So I'm grateful to you for taking the time to sit down with me and talk.
Nathan, you're very gracious and very nice of you to say those kind words. But I have to say that I really appreciate the message you get out. You're helping a lot of people by putting this podcast together. I know it's not easy. And you have a very strong spiritual component to your life. And I think that's amazing. Thank you for serving in the world's greatest Air Force. And, you just keep doing what you're doing. You're knocking it out of the park.
Well, thank you, General. Hey, today, folks, today's episode is only possible thanks to my friend and producer, G. Frazier with 369sounddesign.com. Jeff, you have the hardest job in this entire industry because you have the job of making me sound somewhat brilliant. So thank you so much for that. We are blessed by the entire team here at the Wartime Leadership Podcast. See you next time. Be blessed.